we are now on episode 8. And episode 8 is all about Tartaria. Now, we've talked about this a couple times now, but we're going to go a little different with this one. This one's, of course, another part 1, and we have done 2-3 parts of Tartaria before. But the reason why this one's much different is because we're going more in depth with the technology that was commonly used during that time period versus more or less the collapse. So, Jung, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, well, again, welcome. This is a very special episode, 2 years. I just recently joined, and the title needs a little adjustment, but yeah, I'm really happy to be a part of this. I just want to say this out front. I'm so happy that all of you guys are showing up. It's really awesome to converge and have a mystery school in modern day. Again, you would get killed if you were founding a mystery school back in the day. So this is a pleasure and a treat. And again, you know, Scoob and friends have probably talked about Tartaria in the past, but this will be my first episode with you guys, so I'm going to be putting my 2 cents in. And so just to kick it off, what is Tartaria? You'll hear this all around in the community. Some people talk about, you know, cities and the ancient past, the modern past. So what we're going to discover today is the beauty of Tartaria. And Tartaria was essentially, if we look kind of back to it, was more or less an 18th and 19th century discovery. It was a flourishing age of innovation, creation, and invention that was pretty much located in the North Central Asia region, including Russia, China, and then just recently I found bits in Australia. So this could be kind of a worldwide thing. And it is also synonymous with Tartary. So that is the official flag as you see in the front, which is a griffin, a mythological beast. At least they say it is. Who knows? I also believe dragons are out there somewhere. So it's really cool that some of these old maps have actually included these regions. And it wasn't until people started to really pay attention and hone in that there was something going on in this region of the earth. And it's pretty much widespread. These are pretty old maps, old publishings, but we are most familiar with Tartaria in at least the late 18th century, early 19th century. So it's absolutely fascinating. You're going to want to do your own research when looking into this. Again, we hope that this just inspires you to dig deeper because there's a lot. But yeah, you can see right there up to your right in the yellow highlighted region, that is the entirety of Tartaria or Tartary, as it's confirmed there. And again, lots of influences spread throughout the world, as you'll see. And what's fascinating is that we have to kind of take the same concept of ancient Egyptians inheriting the pyramids, as well as Tartarians or Tartarians, whatever, inheriting their civilization. So we're gonna dive into it, but I think that lays a good foundation.
And I also want to make note that, you know, the best way to kind of think about, you know, to really see the society in your mind is to think of something that wasn't like their borders, they didn't make necessarily sense. You look at China now and you see the Great Wall of China and you look at the history they tell us of that and you're like, so this was built by the Mongols to hold out what? But if you really look at the history of everything, it lines up perfectly between dividing China and Tartaria versus the Mongols and whatever else the Mongols were defending themselves against. I don't remember. I don't know the full history of the Great Wall of China, but it's one that I know that, you know, you could touch on. So it's, It's really fascinating that we still have remnants of this great society that has been just poof from history. Xanox, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'm sending some really cool photos in the chat. Um, one shows, I guess, more direct border outlines of the what you were just talking about with the Mongols and stuff, and then the other one shows some possible languages, writings of the Tartar language. I'm gonna read a excerpt from the CIA document that was declassified in 1998 and created in 1957. And it starts out, or let us take the matter of history, which, along with religion, language, and literature, constitute the core of the people's cultural heritage. Here again, the communists have interfered with it in a shameless manner. For example, on August 9th, 1944, the Central Committee of the Communist Party, sitting in Moscow, issued a directive ordering the party's Tartar Provincial Committee to proceed to a scientific revision of the history of Tartaria, to liquidate serious shortcomings and mistakes of a nationalistic character committed by individual writers and historians in dealing with Tartar history. In other words, Tartar history was to be rewritten um, and falsified, and to eliminate references of their connections to the Russian continent, which is part of Asia. Um, let's see, and because they had also dealt with Muslims within the USSR and the Communist Party. Um, and so right then and there's declassified um, government evidence that, you know, the not just the what do you call it, the institutions and globalist government that we have today hasn't tried, just now to get rid of Tartaria. It's been something that's being erased from our history books for quite some time now, at least a century, if not 2 centuries or so, that they've been trying to hide. That I know other people who have been, for example, migrating from China to that area in Tartaria, like let's say on the Silk Road. Um, they tried to hush that away because they didn't want people finding the more advanced parts of Tartaria as compared to uh, what we know as China today. And that's all for now. I gotta do some more digging.
No, you're fine. So, Junk, what is Antiquitech?
Yeah, you got it on the second time. Antiquitech. So for anybody who doesn't know this term, the literal definition is anciently highly advanced technology which was lost for extended periods of time. And again, we look at Tartaria as a lost civilization. And it's kind of strange to say that because it's more modern day. But something interesting that I also found out that I want to riff off what Xenox was saying is that the Tartarians were very advanced. One of the coolest little facts that I have about them is that their alphabet has 202 characters, 202 letters. So you can only imagine the sophistication of their language, which was probably tenfold, something akin to Latin, which was really, really powerful. But even aside from that, it means Antiquitech, something that has extreme value, something that's useful, something that gives back. And so when we look onto Tartaria and the city at large, we see this kind of cyclical reception, something that gives back to the people as the people give back to the city. It's a full circle. And it's really cool to see because thinking about this as kind of like a borderless region, whoever, and again, this is a really important point to make, whoever were the architects of this Antiquitech, were not the modern day Tartarians. That's something that's really important to know, is that yes, they built upon it. They were influenced by whoever the mentors were, but they're not the official original builders, which is fascinating because one of the biggest things that people notice in observation when observing Tartaria is that you have these magnificent cities and buildings with mud roads, horse and buggy, like things that don't match the fit. The boot doesn't match the mold. And right now, looking back, we can see, especially through our lens of self-awareness, just how energized the city really was. So what you're looking at right now, off to your left, were some of the cathedral windows, which are quite literally cymatics. They hold a sound, and through that, they were able to not only represent what they meant at the time, but they were actually able to harmonize the interior of these buildings. And then off to the right, of course, another coiling effect. It could be some kind of circuitry to allow energy to flow into it or hold the energy within the pillars. So you're going to see a lot more of all of this. But I think the most important point to realize is that we are observing masters at work. Like whoever the architects were 10 times more advanced than what we see in society today. And that is what is a threat to everything that we know in our world, especially when you go into New World Order, etc. All these people are trying to suppress. And again, Scuba said this is going to be a different episode. It is. We will focus on all of the afterwards part of this, the post Tartaria, in our follow-up sequences. But right now, we're just going to admire the details. So even here, as you can see, you have a ninth, I believe this, 6-octave bracket that basically concaves into the doorway, which allows, as we all know with acoustics, to actually amplify and kind of consolidate as you walk in. So it's pretty powerful to see functional architecture, I think, is what we can pretty much describe Antiquitech as.
Yeah, and just a side note, one quick example I read. I didn't really have any visual proof, but I did see that when they had automobiles in their country, they had used a hemp-based shell, which was actually tougher than steel at the time, um, and I guess much more economically efficient. And that's also why probably in modern times most hemp products have been illegal for vast majority of modern time America because when they outlawed marijuana, and most industrial hemp products became obsolete. Now, industrial hemp does kind of exist today, but not to the extent that would be needed for practical use. But it still has an abundance of uses uh, and potential. But go ahead.
Junk, what are we looking at with this photo?
So your basic, again, nothing is unintentional. Everything has a purpose. And so as we kind of like look deeper into this, let me see. Yeah, there we are. So the anode, as you can see in that picture, is the electrode where oxidation occurs. And the cathode is the electrode where reduction occurs. So essentially, in ourselves, we are the battery. And as you can see in these pictures, these buildings are the battery that are being recharged in the cathedral or the cathedral floor, as you'll see in the later slides, which is made up from conductive materials. And it also heals with resonance and sound vibration as it's amplified through the structure. So you need both. And when you have these pillars kind of lined up perfectly, you get that same exact electrical flow. And it's very powerful to think that what we're quite literally looking at isn't some religious institution or some building outfitted with an agenda. These are quite literally performing and allowing anybody who enters their space to be immersed in their fields of energy.
So how does a ceiling like this does this help with acoustics? So that with it arching, it kind of helps carry the sound waves.
I don't know much about those types of ceilings, but um that, or at least that specific one, but I know a lot of ceilings that you might see in very ornate cathedrals or stuff like that. Or I don't know if it necessarily has to do with Tartaria and technology, but they could have gotten that from there. It does amplify the acoustics very well, and in fact, why you see domes on a lot of churches and stuff like that, and why the walls are made of marble and such hard materials, not only just because it's strong and sustainable, but because it amplifies the acoustics. And they actually figure out a way to control the way that the acoustics move throughout the place you're in, the hallways or the building or whatever. And so when they'd have the monks or the choir singing, the voice would quite literally spiral up into uh, the very top of the building, and in their eyes, poetically to the heavens. And so that is one brief example of the architecture. Junk, do you know anything more about this particular example?
Yeah. Go for it, Scoop.
All right. I also want to make note, we're going to go into a little bit later, but a lot of stuff for Tartaria too, you got to think about it in terms of height. At what height would someone be able to build something of some of these objects or architectural designs that we're seeing? Just something to make note. Junk?
Yeah. Wait, actually, go back to the previous one really quick. So it's kind of hard to see, but off to the picture to the left, you're going to notice a lot of tiny little holes in the ceiling. That's intentional. Each little black dot that you might see speckled along that ceiling actually allows beams of sunlight to come through. And the beams of sunlight actually align with the meridian line. So it's basically functional Tartarian design, permitting not only light to heal the audience or whoever's within its attendance, but also the sound, just as Xenox was saying. And it's really powerful. And you'll see the same meridian line off to the right. This is Giovanni Demencio Cassini's design. And right where it all converges there, that is the centermost point of the building, therefore allowing the greatest amount of light to pour through. And what I want to mention too, that's super important to realize, is that these buildings had so much consolidation of energy. I mean, they were built with very key features that in their terms represented heaven. So it's very beautiful, symmetrical, but it also allowed a anchoring of high vibrational light to be filling the space. So it's very natural. Again, something that we all need. But with sound pillars and like copper all over the place, they allowed to activate in such a way that these advanced structures would create the perfect sound resonance for healing to everyone that was within the space. So you could be off to the wall or in the inside. It wasn't focalized just through the tiny holes. That's why you see so many. It was able to hit pretty much everyone. Like if you can imagine a feathering of laser beams, one is about to hit you. That's exactly what they wanted to go for, whoever the architects were. But it's very, very interesting to see how they basically use the placements of the roofing. As you'll see when we look at the top of the roof, I do believe the next slide is going to be the interior. But and I can go on to that because that actually ties in if you want to just switch the slide over.
No, you're fine. I'm just going through all of the mass stuff that Xenox is sending me now. Yeah, I will vote. The previous slide or next slide?
Next slide. So basically, what you're looking at on the left and also in the center, that line that's going through the ground, that is the meridian. So basically, it divides the place in half. But what's interesting as you look at it closer is completely made of copper, a very conductive material, and it's baked into the architecture. So this isn't just design. This is very intentional, and they call these in the deep dive that you'll go on in Tartar history copper lines. And it's very, very powerful to see how they kind of span. Even when you look at the middle image to the bottom right of the square, you'll see a pillar with a copper sphere on top. That line that you're seeing in the ground actually leads up into the pillar and then through the pillar. So they're harnessing energy, and the electromagnetic influences that are surging around this place because it's so harmonically tuned. So it's very interesting to kind of look at these smaller aspects and then see how much detail was poured into these places because they didn't make any mistakes. And that's something that you have to really be conscious of, is just how perfect this really.
Well,
And
remember back in the day that uh contests of like who could build the biggest pumpkin or anything like that. I mean, this was through electrolysis, putting electricity in the ground to make things better. And I mean, I'm stopping from there. But
No, I get what you're saying. Um,
yeah,
and you'll
it's
actually
just
see that
all
in a lot of supernatural phenomena, even where uh, whether it's paranormal activity or UFO activity, where they use electromagnetism to affect the way plants grow and form. So it's a phenomena you see repeated throughout the world, not just by Tartarians.
and they made it to a competition, and we don't realize that we can all do this. It's
Mm.
so twisted and nasty.
So
But
I want to make one really important, actually fascinating point before we move on, is that while you can see the copper lines streaming through the ground, this might blow your mind, but the copper lines themselves are aligned with the ley lines of the planet. So whoever the Tartarian architects were, they were very well versed in astrology. They were very well versed in the planet and the key places that would enhance any kind of healing by using copper, not only by knowing what copper is and being able to wield it and weld it that way, but they did some absolutely incredible things. And, ley lines can't necessarily be seen on maps like longitude or latitude because they're foundational to the Earth's energetic grid. So, whoever was making these were tuned in to the electromagnetic paths of these ancient sites and specifically built them on top of them, marked the area, and then made beautiful designs from them. So we're working with artists here, really.
I also want to make note. Wait, hold on. Let me make this point. Junk, you said it earlier, and it very much thought or made me think about where we're at today and how much mistakes we make in terms of just basic house power. I can't tell you how many houses that I've personally been out to where things didn't work, and sure enough the electricity is just bad in the house, and here you see just something so perfect and just awe-inspiring.
Oh, I was just gonna touch upon
Hold on one second.
oh you
Copper Aura Tools, you wanted to say something?
please
um
do go on.
one thing I just want to touch on. Junk did say they're artists, and that kind of struck a chord with me. In the article I just read, was going really deep into some of the history that they had found on the Tartarians, and I guess there was testimony from the little information they found on the Tartarians trying to, I guess, put a foothold in the Americas, and they were ultimately uh, not nearly as successful as the Europeans. For quote, they were going on and talking about how the Europeans were much more of a warring faction. Um, Meanwhile, the Tartarians were more artistic and scientifically inclined, and that's why the inhospitable lands, or not inhospitable, but the hostile and dangerous lands of the Americas were more, uh, so I guess, appropriate for the Europeans, so to speak.
So,
But that's
Junk, I thought obelisks were bad because they represent the phallus. What is this?
So, okay, we know that the origins of Tartaria are shrouded in mystery. But then again, what we see time and time again is a cyclical representation of atmospheric harnessing. And what's fascinating is that the obelisk that you're looking at right here is based in Rome. I believe it's called Circus Nero.
I think it's
Yeah, no, the obelisks have been moving around. That's the
Oh.
thing, is like they stole it from Egypt, and then they used it because they understood what the purpose was. Now, the image off to your right, what you're seeing is you're actually, all those little circles are placements of where energy is most focalized. So, as we all know, and if you don't know by now, we're going to inform you that these obelisks, of which you think would just be pillars, you've seen them all around the world in France and Egypt, etc. They are actually harnessing energy from the ionosphere. So basically, using that energy through a conductive circuitry, as you see from the top head point. And we're going to get into that later on. But right now, just correlating that kind of size of a structure, and then off to the right, seeing exactly where is the most consolidated points of intersection, of energetic exchange. And I found that absolutely fascinating, because when you compare that to Antiquitech within Tartaria, including that facet, they know exactly the direction and flow of energy of these buildings, of many of these receivers, again, of which we will touch on in a minute. But just think about that. They've mapped out the invisible energy flow and where to place certain objects. So I thought that was very fascinating, and I wanted to include that in there.
That is very fascinating. What kind of innovation was present in Tartaria? Xenox, do you want to answer this one?
And it
Go for it.
goes, having achieved this conquest, the Tartars and their descendants had probably a much harder task to perform. This was to subdue the more ferocious and warlike European colonists who had entrenched and fortified themselves in the country. After the arrival of the Tartars, or the Indians as they are now called, in the particular parts they had settled themselves in along the region of the Atlantic. Um, so they too had uh, gone into the Americas. Um, it says 16th century. Let me click on this link. 16th century Tartarian king ruled over Corvaria Regnum in North America. Which is part of the Colorado expedition. Okay. Wow, we're getting really deep into history here. This might have to be on part 2.
Yeah, pretty much. There's a lot of stuff that's going to have to be on part 2. So, staying more or less on topic, Junk, what are we looking at here? I know it says it's a street light, but how the hell did they have electricity back then?
Well, the same way everybody has electricity in the ancient world, which is through ether. And this is a very natural source of nature. This is something of which we should have always tapped into, something that Tesla was very familiar with and tried to bring to the light of day. But what you're seeing right now is not only a schematic of these actual pillars, but upon collecting energy, they stored them in within themselves and were able to illuminate at night, which was absolutely fascinating because I stumbled across so many pictures that even through a film photograph made you think, how bright are these things? Like, how intense and how much energy did they have? And you could see this same kind of illumination off building tops, but more or less they had these street posts, and this would be more than enough to light their way. You know, no candles needed. They were working directly with this kind of steampunk invention, which was perfect, cyclical, and allowed infinite capacity. So I would love to see if somebody could recreate one of these in modern day. I think that would be brilliant. Um, but just looking back and seeing this, you realize that they didn't need half the things that they were necessarily entitled to as a civilization from that century. They were so much, they were so far ahead, and therefore posed a threat to the orders that be. And again, we're going to follow up, as we said earlier, in more episodes to come. But for now, just take a look at this and imagine yourself walking down the street and seeing this illuminated post that is 3 times thicker than your natural post. Just a beautiful light beam coming out. It would inspire you to love your city, and not, it would inspire innovation, invention within you. And I think that's exactly what all of this was meant for. It was meant to captivate the human mind and really allow people to see what is possible so that they can make the next thing possible.
That's awesome. I genuinely agree with that, because if I knew that there was a fountain like that existed near me, I'd just go to it every day just to look at it, be around its peaceful embrace, because it looks like such a small, like a soft light. Doesn't look very bright, doesn't look like it's intensive, almost as if you're looking at a campfire almost. I don't know. Something to think about. So what are we looking at here? Seems like electric cars have been around for a while, and Men in Black stole an invention from years ago, it seems.
Yeah, so off to your left, we have something of which they call the Dynasphere, essentially a one-wheeled automotive transportation device. And it's fascinating because this, I mean, just looking at it for my own self, I would love to own one of these. This puts any motorcycle to shame. And that thing is so cool. And it's very functional too. It looks like there's some kind of gyroscopic element to allow the user to remain steady no matter the positioning of the wheel. And then, of course, you know how modern day, the media, movies, television, they love kind of rubbing in our face lost history. They brought this back, and I definitely think it was intentional. You don't just think of this. And it's pretty sad to think, but it's also inspiring at the same time, because you realize if they know about that and tides are changing, we're going to receive all of these inventions. We're going to inherit this knowledge and this wisdom once again, and it's going to make society look very beautiful. And I think through that, there's not going to be as much conflict, because people are going to actually be wanting to invest in their pride and societal expectations. And then, yeah, go for it.
It will create a need to create.
It's a good way of putting it. Yeah. And then off to the middle, something fascinating I found, which is a floating city. And if you played BioShock Infinite, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Lots of elements of Tartaria in there, but it's fascinating to think that they were thinking outside of the box. They were really innovating, trying new things. They weren't afraid to create. And so you have concepts like this, which may have been real at one point. We don't know. But it's fascinating to think, especially with their track record, I wouldn't argue against it. I mean, if there's a will, there's a way. And even there, if you look really close to that image in the center, you'll see an elevator. So it looks like that was propelled upwards and downwards to transport people to and from the building, and that the balloon was more or less stationary indefinitely. So little things we're just seeding your mind with of what they're capable of. And then finally, off to your right, this is more of a modern newspaper. This is kind of easing into, I believe, the 1920s or 30s. You might see a date on there somewhere.
August 28th, 1921.
21, yeah.
The Arizona Republication.
So what you're seeing right there in the middle is a man driving a car, and then if you look really closely, he has two bulbs on the front of his grill. Now, what are those bulbs, you say? If we compare them to the Tartarian architecture, we can see that they're harnessing some kind of energy. And the statement that's listed in bold just above the image, electricity taken from air drives automobile. Essentially what they're saying is that he is driving the car with atmospheric energy, aka ether, and he's allowed to move through transportation without a third-party fossil fuel. So what does that tell you? That is a threat. That man is probably not alive when he was debuting this, and it's hard to think about how much suppression there's been, but you start to see how much it would radically transform and change the world if we all had cars that never needed to be charged, or gasoline to fill us to get a couple of miles. We would be traveling nonstop. We would be communicating with different civilizations, and it's a whole rabbit hole. But again, Tartarian innovation is one of the most fascinating rabbit holes I've come across. It's just one thing after the other, and these people were very wise. Again, whoever inherited these cities were able to use what they were given. So there was some seeding of information too that was lost, and we're going to follow that up in the next couple of episodes as well.
Would it be possible, Scuba, for you to put in the video I just uploaded? It's like 3 minutes of a lot of the stuff Junk just talked about. It shows pictures.
Also, Scuba, remember that video I sent you, the People Mover one? I guess that comes up in the next question, so we'll save it for that.
Yeah, the People Mover. Yeah, I see that now. Okay, gotta get through this because he's want me to show this. All right, so I'm just gonna let that play through, do its thing.
Can you big screen it at all?
It is at big screen, bud. Or, oh God, no, can't do that. They're too blurry.
It looked all right from our perspective.
Lower the speed so we can get some views on it. There we go.
While we're watching this, Junk had talked to us earlier that they had used the atmospheric energy, or what they call AEE, and they had put it into buildings, public spaces, and stuff to generate light. But it also helped regulate temperature and create an energy field that made it so bacteria could not grow, and so it really helped things be more clean.
They had a thing for glass bubbles.
Yeah, I wonder if that has something to do with it generating the electricity inside of it. Perhaps, what do we use in our light bulbs? Is that direct current or alternating current?
Depends upon the light bulb.
I see.
Are you talking about an LED or a regular fluorescent?
Regular old light bulb.
I think it's alternating current. Yes, it's alternating current.
What did Tesla use?
You know what? Okay, that's annoying. I don't. That's rude. How dare they?
Fuck that one.
Should I smack you? Because how do you not know that? What did Thomas Edison do to try and prove that Nikola Tesla's version of electricity was dangerous?
Go ahead.
He killed a fucking elephant in front of a live audience to try to prove a point.
Yes.
But he ended up being wrong anyways. So to answer your question, alternating current. All right. Some of these I would say are Tartarian. Some of them I would say
Are pretty fake.
not fake, just some that's Titanic. Are some very good inventions throughout the years.
Yeah.
So there was a point.
Fair.
There was a point post Tartarian Empire where creativity wasn't frowned upon. Everyone was able to create and be innovative and, embody this creative, civilization and the world's fairs. Yeah, so people were allowed to, embrace their creativity and share their technology. And then I was speaking to Junk about it earlier, and it was at the world's fairs where they decided, okay, this is allowed, this is allowed. No way society can have this. No way can society have that. And they kind of pinpointed who was gonna change society for the better, or who was gonna change society for the worse. Because a lot of the crap that they add in food these days, a lot of the chemically processed food, those ideas were also brought to the world at these world's fairs. It wasn't just innovative technology. It was actually food-based as well. And they were all over that, because now look at today with all the processed food and the lack of innovative technology. They really fucked us,
Yeah, that's another thing. Creativity is a skill that's not really used at all or nurtured in today's society. Um, for the most part, especially in schools anyway. They really focus on memory and comprehension to a degree, um, and conscription. Uh, but they don't exercise like basic skills, social skills, artistic skills that very much. You might have like a small little class on physical education or music, but that's like a tenth or 20th of your actual education. Um, so it's really interesting. The amount of
I like
creativity
that
that
ones.
they had back then. I mean, how many inventors do you know today? Just trying to come up with new ideas.
Depends upon what you would call new ideas, because if it's too good of an idea, it gets scrubbed. So this,
Yeah, but I mean,
hold on, Junk,
back
would you
in the
like to talk
day,
about this?
you go.
Yeah, so just as Copper Aura was talking, this is actually footage from a World's Fair, and it's a people mover. It's quite literally moving people. You can see the background static, and people are stepping on, stepping off. So it's fascinating, and I do believe that's your next question in the reel. But yeah, I'll let you ask it, and we'll jump back in.
How does free energy fit into the society, and what was actively implemented? So, as you can see here on the left, you have what I believe is St. Petersburg, and a lot of different buildings with domes on them with a point on it. One thing that we have seen as a common theme throughout this society, our society, and many other societies throughout history, is that the big, large, cathedral-sized buildings always go up to a point, even though the ones today. Now, the ones today do it in such a poor job that, it's more for show than it is actually conductive. But it's fascinating to sit here and think about, okay, this building right here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, roughly between 7 to 15 different points on it, all of which could be very, very well conducting from the ionosphere. So that building within itself could power an entire city block if it wanted to. If it really, really wanted to, which they can. They just have to open up the circuits to allow the power to flow. Think of it kind of like a flow of water. Electricity flows just like water flows. If something's going to block the current, it's not going to go anywhere. Junk, is there anything you want to add?
Well, actually, that's a perfect segue. Yeah, you're going to see a bunch of domed architecture fitted with some kind of copper crown, or as we would call some kind of an antenna, and that gets into the next slide. But just looking at these right now, you have to see that the uniformity is no mistake. This is exactly how you harness and harvest, as the title implies, this atmospheric energy. It allows for a single focal point to kind of cultivate that 0 point center from which it could drag down into the building. And what's fascinating is that even as it went into the building itself, you mentioned this, Scuba, there you have to have if we're facing basically the idea that the energy has to flow to some region, then as you see in the graphic right there, as it goes into the cavity resonator, it basically draws the energy down, and all the electromagnetic energy is extracted and stored in the toroid coils, the coils at the bottom of these essentially power plants. I mean, because we think about a pyramid, same effect. We think about a Tesla tower, same effect. So once you capture the energy, you have to store it somewhere. And so we saw an image at the very beginning of this talk where we saw these pillars with spirals. That's exactly where the capacitors would be to hold and store the energy for later use. And this would basically allow for coordinated distribution of water, gas, electromagnetic energy to fund the transportation systems, be reliable and responsible for communications, and for anything else that society would need, which I think is at the core fundamental. I mean, if you have this kind of energy, you can pretty much do anything you want. And it's the best part is that it's all from nature. This is a free energy device that they've created, and they've been able to capture and tap into the elements of this planet. And I think that's the one thing the NWO, and you all know what I'm talking about, they don't want. They don't want you to be organic, to have that intimate connection with nature, because once you do, you're liberated from their control.
Yeah, there's no going back.
None. No, nothing at all. And it's just beautiful, because even when we were talking about those fountains, right, the illuminated fountains, you basically have the air molecules and the atoms in the shell of it ionizing and basically exciting, giving off this intense glowing light. And while it receives an enormous discharge of electrical energy, it's vaporized and then it basically illuminates. So that's the functionality of that when you're looking back in that direction. But even for such things as a bigger building, as the ones you can even see in the the featured graphic below, you have to think about how has Tartarian architecture transcended that society, and we're getting a brief glimpse of where it's headed. You know, you don't have to look far, you just have to look. You have to know what you're looking for, and it usually always deals with some kind of spire extending towards the sky and allowing that kind of capacity to discharge downwards and be stored for later consumption.
And taking a page from Nikola Tesla and Victor Schauberger, if you can, I don't expect you to, because at some of these places it would take a lot, especially 9/11, the Eiffel Tower, the building in Seattle. But if you can, try and see the history of the places these buildings were built on top of. You might find that some, if not all of them, were built on top of an aquifer.
Something else I want to add about the architecture of Tartaria is something I learned is it's not necessarily something that contributes to the conductivity and the harnessing of the ether. Is the buildings themselves obviously had the antenna and the copper dome and the receiver for the ether, but it wasn't necessarily marble it was made of. I've heard theories that it was made of some type of geopolymer mixture of like conductive materials, like metals and all sorts of conductive materials to allow the energy that they gather to be dispersed throughout the building much more efficiently. And it mimics, these geopolymers mimic like marble and these glorious like stones. But countries throughout the world use like their own unique geopolymer mixture. It's not like the same in every country. So that's something to look into. And like you were saying, Scoob, like they must have, utilized water underneath the buildings to also contribute. They were just using all of these methods to contribute to efficient conductivity and efficient conductivity of energy.
Absolutely. So what you're seeing in this graphic now is just a more in-depth diagram of how one of these buildings would take in and store energy in a short burst. This wouldn't necessarily be a capacitor in any form. This would just be the conductor. So this would just be the thing that would be transferring the energy from the sky and sending it down into the capacitors for them to chill out, hang out, be distributed wherever they need to go.
Scoob, I want to make one before you go to the next slide. This is like really cool little fact, but if you're following my page at all, you probably saw me post a video of plasma in a airtight chamber, and when it's extracted in that way, it actually creates a torus. And so listed in this diagram, right where you're seeing the top yellow color, is actually something called the toroid chamber, which you imagine the torus kind of infinite flux of plasma or ether or atmospheric energy. That's exactly what it would look like. So my curiosity peaked, and I would be like, what does that look like in there? Like if you were standing inside the top dome, would there be this like beautiful violet hue that lit up the place in some pictures that you saw like with Tesla? Like, is that what it would look like on the inside? Because they've hidden it like a facade from the outside that all you would think it's a roof. But diving deeper, there's so much beyond the surface. And I think it's really important to take a look at this diagram a second time, because you can now go around to such places as St. Peter's Basilica or Rome or all of these places and think, what's behind that dome? Like, what's inside? What's really going on? Because these things never stopped cultivating energy. that's the thing that people often forget. It's the ones that were destroyed, yes, because they're no longer in proximity where they need to be. But the ones that are intact, you can almost guarantee that there's something going on. And actually, Scuba, you have a video I sent you if you wanted to show them, actually, a couple of videos of these antenna quite literally active in modern day.
Yeah, let me. With the active antenna.
I love this video. And during like the wars, really, the destruction of these buildings were completely intentional, and they were obviously taking the gold from the tops of the building and doing whatever they wanted with it, really.
Copper next week. That's next week's topic.
Okay, sweet.
This is just more or less going over and observing, you know, what this society was before the fall.
Yes, just a teaser for next week. There's a reason why I mentioned they're not exactly a warring nation, and I think that was a great expert from the Americas.
This one looks more toroidal than the other one. The other one looked like a little ball of energy. This one actually, you can physically see the toroid field, which I find interesting. The one prior.
Yeah, and it also has some kind of like Asian influence in the architecture, so that makes you question how broad was the Tartarian border and how far widespread was this technology.
Exactly. There was even buildings that mimicked stuff like Tartaria in like Vietnam, all sorts of Asian Eastern countries. It's interesting.
So this is the video Junk was talking about where he's creating a torus inside of a vacuum. I'm going to assume that that little Tesla coil that isn't fully wrapped, that is next to him, is plugged in and active. It's just not doing anything. But since he's got the little conducting rod on top of that syringe there, he's just kind of creating a vacuum for the electricity to travel in.
Yeah, I know. That's really amazing.
Also, that's the color we were talking about that would be entering the building. So it's beautiful. It's like a pinkish violet.
It is the crown chakra color. Now here we have Mercury basically rotating inside of a tin bowl. Junk, you want to go into a little bit better?
Yeah, so what you're looking at is a liquid mercury vortex in a magnetic field. And again, what he's implementing, I don't believe is plugged in. I think it just has copper tips, and it allows for the magnetic field to enter kind of a flux. See, he can flip it over, change current. And then it makes you like wonder, well, what was the role of mercury? And I can tell you that it was very prominent, even more so than people believe, because red mercury were usually contained in the capacitors that basically served as frequency amplifiers. So if you have red mercury in a vortex, it's allowing even a stronger pull of that atmospheric energy into the building. And those would be seen in the spires and kind of like the spherical elements.
Yeah, we touched upon I guess modern versions of mercury generators that we've seen, I guess, in the Western world. Scuba, do you remember that? Do you want to see if I could find a video of one?
No, I don't remember that. Trying to get us back where we were. There we go. Okay, put this back over there. All right. So here's another set of pictures, more of the domes, giving you different, visual representations of what these tips and points look like. And you have the antenna, the resonator, the antenna, and then a resonator. And then as Junk was saying, red mercury in the container capacitor, frequency amplifier.
Yeah, I would also like to say that the energy does funnel down into a vortex, which is something powerful, especially when you study sacred geometry and you see how fundamental that formation is. So it just adds like another layer of understanding of how we can give and receive with nature in itself, and it's beautiful.
That design, that vortex pattern, it makes me think of these coils that I make. Were inspired by John Archibald Wheeler and his studies of closed loops and coils and how they generate that pattern generates a electromagnetic field. So it's interesting that how when it's getting harnessed through the ether, it mimics that spiralized pattern. So I think that's really cool.
Hey Scuba, I'm sending you a video at 9:20 time mark for the generator.
I'd love to see a world where I can go outside and there's no power lines. It'd be freaking awesome.
Okay. I gotta get this video up. Goodness gracious.
So
Oh, Junk, do you want to talk about this? Do you know I know what this is.
This is
Junk.
so awesome. Yeah.
No, you take it. You take it.
So basically what this is a early invention, basically utilizing the earlier forms of, let's say, changing alternating current to direct current. So what you're looking at right now is a power supply for a computer before computers existed. So that takes alternating current, takes it in, and has a little bit of mercury on the bottom of that massive glass dome, and it spins it real fast, creating a blue glow. I think, and
you can
Junk actually
see
has
it
a.
in the video.
I'm sure I can go through and repost, unless Junk. No, actually, Junk didn't. Somebody in the new Telegram or new Templars group chat posted about it. So shout out to whoever did that. I don't remember because it was months ago, but I was super fascinated when it was posted. So thank you for that. I just don't remember who did. But yeah, this is basically a device that changes alternating current to direct current. And I don't think they'll get it to... Oh, they do get it to work. See the blue glow? That's the mercury at the bottom. You can actually see it spinning real fast. And there's also a needle that's going by on the mercury that's changing the electricity.
I think it was called a mercury arc rectifier or something.
Yep. So that version was from the 1940s, but they were originally created in the early 1910s.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of them power elevators. Maybe that was the later design.
So that is Tartarian architecture before it, or technology before it was lost. What form of, so this one's my favorite one. I love this one. What form of public transformation was openly available in Tartaria? Good.
That's
Oh, man.
it's transportation. That was my fault.
Good grammar. Love it. Absolutely love it. Fully live here, ladies and gentlemen. Fully live. All right. They fucking love airships, guys. They okay. This is something that burns me to my core, and that is all of our cities that have ever been made are not designed for cars. Cars have always been an afterthought. And the reason why I say that is because we always had other modes of transportation, walking, tram, those not escalator, but those walk lifts.
It was the Hyperloop. You lay down in it and it through the city, whatever it
The
was called.
Hyperloop, yes. We had that unicycle motor, the motorcycle with one wheel. So there were many different ways of travel. Horse and buggy. There were not cars. Cars were too wide. Cars are too big, and the way
Too
that they
loud.
were too loud, and the way that they were being designed at this time period, they were just not practical in the city. It was until later that it ended up being forced upon us. But cities were originally designed for people to be walking mainly in them, using public transportation, using, we have that now, but we have buses. It's clogged. It doesn't feel that the city doesn't feel natural because we have to lumber around all of this traffic and cars versus just everybody walking around the city. So, John, take it away.
Well, I mean, before we even get into these beautiful beasts, let's talk about what you were just mentioning previously, you and Copper. Basically, as you saw before, we have the people movers. We had underground tunnels, basically platforms, vessels interconnecting all the cities without any disruption that transferred luggage, people, objects, etc. You had the one wheel things. You had so many different avenues on the ground. And then again, where it really got crazy was these airships, because this is something that Copper taught me himself, which I'll let you describe what we're seeing on the right image, bottom left square, because yeah, it's pretty intense.
Yeah, what's happening is a Zeppelin, an airship, is docking, and the tips of these buildings were docking stations where the ship could recharge using etheric energy, and like we were discussing earlier, and they could, board and depart people off of the Zeppelin. People in Tartaria had style, man. These ships were beautiful. They served food, and it was just an amazing way of transportation that doesn't involve annoying traffic and peak hour. And it was amazing. And a lot of the old photographs of these Tartarian cities, the sky is bleached out because they're trying to purposely hide the fact that we had an amazing way of travel through the air. And yeah, they charged using the ether. Super fascinating.
Yeah, so it's kind of like they almost stayed in the air 24/7, which is fascinating to think about, because these things can really accommodate. And as you're seeing, they're enormous. I mean, city blocks wide worth of transportation with little to no downside. I mean, besides the startup cost, these things were running and they were working. And then you think about safety, right? Safety is a huge priority to people. You would be safer because there would be so many ways of maintaining an altitude, especially at the speeds there, where it's like a leisurely cruise among the skies. And again, I'm just doubling back on this. If you haven't played BioShock Infinite, go on YouTube and look at it. You're going to see remnants of this society. It's absolutely beautiful. And it wasn't until later years when, the Nazis got in control of such technology that they created the Hindenburg and that whole situation, which personally, and I do want to save this for the next episode, just a forethought. I do believe that they made a mockery of it on purpose, because if you show volatility to the public in mass hysteria, chances are that invention is going to be shelved for life. And I mean, just think about how beautiful it'd be. And Scoop, you can go back to the slide we just came from. But to be there on the ground and see that thing flying through the sky, something 6 times larger than the Goodyear blimp, that it would just be
Well, no,
so awe.
just look at the Eiffel Tower picture. I mean, look at that fucking thing.
Yeah, whales.
It would be quite grand. Yeah.
And
I also
it's
want to
beautiful
make.
too.
Hold on. There's a big point that you made: safety. All right. The only reason why the Hindenburg went down the way it did is because it was fucking blown out of the sky. All right. Nine chances out of 10, you puncture a hole in that balloon, it's not coming crashing down. It's gonna slowly lose its air, and you're gonna just. It's gonna hurt, but you're not gonna die.
It would
You're
be
not.
like an airplane crash, that's for sure.
Yeah, it would not be, an airplane crash. And, the way that it's aerodynamically made, it would also, it would be slow fall. So you're not having to worry about G's. So, like I said, it would hurt, but not as bad as a plane. And it's really funny how, Junk made a very good point. Right after World War One, we went straight to planes. It was all immediate. There was no skipping it. It was just straight to planes. So
Yeah, straight Zeppelins aren't safe. These are safer. Do this instead.
Actually,
no, hold
I
on.
think in World War
Xenox.
Okay.
Hope, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, my only thought is in today's world, with the winds and with the weather makers and that sort of thing, how resilient are they to wind?
No. That's the thing. I mean, you get into HARP and everything like that, but these things are aerodynamic, as you can see with the ridges, and it would be very seamless. Like there wouldn't be turbulence. And again, they fly at such a low proximity that they're not interfering with that kind of
Yeah,
rough.
they're not going very high.
True, good point. They're not like as high as a jet. Yeah.
No, you have this one at 8, not even at 1,000 feet. Not even at 1,000 feet. So, our tallest skyscrapers aren't even 1,000 feet. Well, no, that's not true.
Scuba, I sent you a video of the Hindenburg cruising over New York. If you want to show that to give people reference.
Okay.
And I'm thinking that the outer part of the main, what I want to say, unit was probably like a skin where it would float with some of the wind, maybe, or cave in and resist,
Oh,
maybe.
okay. I was about to say, how is
Because it had
that?
like a skeleton, like a frame. It wasn't exactly just a balloon. So yeah.
You scared me, Junk. You scared me with this video. I'm like, how the hell does this thing have color? And I was like, oh wait, AI.
I've never done this. This is cool. But it looks so alien, right? Like they're just like, wow, look at it. But it's like back then it was so normalized in the Tartarian Empire and a little bit afterwards. Now it's just
Well,
like, what is this thing?
Well, the thing is, though, and we're gonna go into this next week. The way they destroyed Tartaria is it almost brings me to tears, really.
Agreed. A lot of the people were messed up. Any remnants of the old world, being Tartaria, they were put in the madhouse or killed. It was up.
Put in the madhouse, killed, or even worse, the orphan trains.
The orphan trains, the cloned babies. I don't know if you guys are speaking about that soon, but
that I feel like that's a little too sci-fi at that stage. I feel like that's a little too much because there isn't that much tangible information on that one.
Yeah.
All right. Don't mean to go through all of our DMs. It's just crap. All right, here we go. Back to the slide. So, was there any unique or unusual? Was there anything unique or unusual about the Tartarian people? So, as I stated earlier and made you think about some of these structures that were a little bit larger than what we have is now between, a 4 foot and 6 foot tall human. And that is, they had 8, 9 feet tall, sometimes 10 feet tall people.
And these weren't even the largest, and they lived amongst each other. So it was, like you were saying, they're very multicultural. They lived amongst giants and different cultures, which I thought was awesome.
And I want to know, damn it, he doesn't have them. He's a very lucky. Most giants have 6 fingers.
Really?
Yeah, the Nephilim.
Ah, right, genetics. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
So yeah, Junk, do you want to talk about giants?
I mean, just let the pictures speak for themselves. It's fascinating, just as Copper was saying, they coexisted, which I think is fascinating because, if you're not hiding history and you're allowed to live in it, then you get diversity in this kind of exchange. And you look off to the third image, the one in sepia tone, that's a family. So they weren't just coexisting; they were breeding.
She doesn't look like a chick. She looks like a dude.
No, that's one of the kind of characteristics of giants is they take on a more masculine appearance.
Yeah, that's true.
That's definitely a woman. Yeah.
It's a big old lady.
But regardless, I think it's absolutely fascinating because, again, you look at the architecture, you look at some of these entrance ways. It wasn't just meant for a 5'7" some, civilian. It was meant for anyone and everyone. So it seemed like whoever the architects were could have been of giant origin, which is another fascinating seed to plant. But just looking at these vintage photos, they weren't hiding it. They were out in the open. They were peaceful, and
they were just hanging out.
And I had some other images that didn't fit, but there was also an Asian man, an Asian woman. So you're looking at all races here. And I mean, again, the bone structure is just insane. And as Copper was saying, these aren't even the tallest. So
it's stuff like this that it makes me wish I wasn't born in this time and I wasn't born an American. Because holy crap, the America just does not teach us shit. They
Same.
tell you giants don't exist while keeping giants in their basement. Cough, cough, Smithsonian. But we won't talk about that. That's another episode. I feel like we should talk about the Smithsonian one day and some of the stuff they have locked away.
Epic.
Were any of the society's inventions stolen? If so, what was it and where are they now? Junk, you want to take this one away?
Well, yeah, I'm gonna open the floor for anybody to add on to this. But my 2 cents to this is obviously the obelisks. Um, it was like a past favor. Sisterhood of the traveling obelisk, right? Like these things were moved around, used, placed elsewhere. But I think what's really interesting is that the even into Tesla's time, as much as he got of this, was able to carry on the legacy of atmospheric energy harvesting, which is very powerful. And I do believe that the elites, especially at the Vatican, all around the world, the ones who are really in the know of what these things can do, have made it useful to them and their society. And it's just sad to see that hoarding of free energy resource while they charge you buckets to get a tank of gas or to light your home. It's insane. And again, they want this because if everybody had it, they wouldn't be special. And so I feel like that grab take mentality has continued on, but it most definitely took from the Tartarian people the most, I believe. It took their whole way of life. And you possibly talk to people that are still living in these regions, they'll be clueless. It's almost like when I went to Egypt and they had no idea the truth of what was lying before them. I mean, you wipe memory clean, and again, we're going to talk about that another day, but there's so much lost and forgotten history, and I believe that this stealing and the suppression was fundamental to that memory wipe. And if anybody else knows any stolen inventions, I would love to hear them.
I would say anything that Tesla came up with, honestly. Anything that Tesla put forward or really envisioned, because there's no doubt in my mind that he had some sort of connection to Tartaria. He just breathes that essence of that entire style, in my opinion, at least. Xenox, do you know of any other inventions that were stolen?
In general, or
In general, offhand.
like hidden or like just stolen?
I'd say hidden. I mean, Notre Dame.
I mean, like modern times or historically?
Modern times, historically. I mean, they happened in the past and have been used against us now.
Yeah, I know there have been multiple people that have actually created cars that run on water or highly efficient hydrogen cells. But those inventions have been scrapped. There's been
Yeah, like in the fireplaces, like we were talking about before, they used the spheres to generate heat and essentially an etheric air conditioning. But that's why you always see these spheres in the fireplaces. But they also use, from my understanding, like uranium and stuff like that. And this technology isn't new either. You know, all the just I'd say all the inventions, not all of them, most of them from Tesla, they're just rediscovered from a past civilization, which he was innovative enough to do so. Not discrediting him, but you know, they were already there and utilized in these ancient civilizations.
One thing that I want to say that was stolen, the free energy. I mean, look at it. It's in the churches. It's in the Vatican. It's in places like Washington, D.C. But, you know, here we have working class workers such as myself, such as Xenox, and such as everyone else out there in the world that, you know, such as, you know, anybody out there in the world, you know, they just sit here and hoard it and do whatever they want with it and don't tell you about it and make you go there, sing hymns, amplify the acoustics with your pure intention while tricking you and taking your money and making you feel guilty if you don't give up your money. And it's not the church that'll make you feel guilty, it's everybody around you that will make you feel guilty. It's a very, very what?
You made a perfect point there, which is a vibrational thing.
Yep.
It, you know, like so for example, in Tartaria, these buildings, these dome-shaped roof buildings that were or can be considered religious sanctuaries, they were basically aligned on these ley lines for the purpose of alignment and healing, but also more importantly, as it anchored high vibrational light into the building, it also had a functionality with ascension, which is basically the full energetic and spiritual alignment of your body. So they were healing acoustic chambers that allowed so much more light and love to fill the space. But as Scuba mentioned, the demonization of shall I say, the commercialization of these sanctuaries really led into greed, anger, fear, and that saturated the energy that the buildings were already naturally producing. Therefore, the ones who go in them might have a good feeling, but you know, you can only feel so good until you get past the handbag and has to put $20 into the pastor's back pocket. I'm not saying anything. I really want to talk about organized religion, Scoob. You know that. But save that for another episode.
No, I hear you. It's just, yeah, vibration is the biggest key. I mean, look at that. Those people look happy. If I was in the presence of something like this and I knew it was built within loving intentions, I would just be happy. So I'm not going to go through all of the photos here. Just some of them. Just some of them. So as I usually do, gonna quickly go here, go there. Andrea, you've been kind of quiet. How do you feel about all this stuff? Bet she's not even paying attention. Nope, not paying attention at all.